Welcome to the Author Corner, our chance to meet the authors you'll want to read. I'm Stephanie, and I'm so delighted to be joined by author Michael Watt. He's the author of Lovers Own the Silence, his first novel. Michael, thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And you're first, and it's a killer, man. I better not drop it on my toe.
It's a real book.
It's a real book.
Yeah, it kind of took my breath away when I first saw it. I was like, son of a gun, it's a real book.
Yeah, somehow when it's a file on a computer, it doesn't
Correct.
have that kind of heft to it.
Yeah, it has a bit of a thump factor. When you drop it on the table, it makes a thump.
It does, yeah. You know,
that's
there
really
we go.
Yeah. There must be something worth reading in there. It made a thump when it hit the table.
And how long was the process? I mean, when did this story first come into your head?
Well, let's put it this
years.
way. The first version I completed on July 7th, 2007.
You don't seriously know that date?
Well, I do. It happens to be my younger brother's birthday.
Okay.
So I thought, well, that's appropriate.
I guess you weren't at a party. You were right.
I was not. I finished it. I was like, that's it. I'm done. First draft completed.
2007.
So it was 18 years. The final version of it actually published on July 15th, 2025. So
all right.
It's an 18-year gap.
18-year gap.
Yeah,
okay. So I often say to people, Gone with the Wind, it took 10 years. You surpassed that.
I surpassed that. Well, it wasn't. I didn't necessarily work on it
no,
all 18 years.
I'd like to think you did other things.
Well, you let it ferment, and honestly, sometimes you had to remind yourself that you had this project. But you know, infinite patience has instant rewards, and I was lucky enough to have a lot of people kind of look at it and say, "Hey, you might want to work this out or work that out." And the version that's here is very, very different than that first draft.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And that alone, I love that statement because I think I'm gleaning two things from that. One is that, you know, like, do not serve any wine before it's time.
Right.
Things take time, and that's okay. And even if you have something in a drawer, it'll come to its conclusion. But also that your first draft is not your final
Correct.
copy.
And I think what's really kind of interesting about that is the message in the novel, the thought process. I think society, I don't want to sound too grandiose, but society is more open to what it has to say now than it might have been back in 2007. So you kind of have to let the game come to you a little bit. And I think there's a reason why, and a big part of the book is the main characters are encouraged to let go and let God. And a big part of that is God has a plan. You know, man plans and God laughs. And the idea is that when you kind of surrender to that higher power and let that higher power guide you, you'll find that it may not be what you had in mind, but more importantly, it's what God has in mind. And you have to, you know, walk in faith, not by sight, and you have to believe that what God has in mind for you is better than you could ever imagine.
That takes a lot of faith to accept that.
Well, faith is really a recurring theme in the book, and the opposite of faith is not having faith and looking for redemption, looking for happiness in external forces. And when you do that, you know, whether it be a bottle or drugs or sex or clothing, fashion, whatever, it's a fool's errand, and you're never going to be happy. You know, as somebody once said, I've looked for happiness at the bottom of a lot of bottles and I never found it. And again, the recurring theme of the book is to look inside and allow what's in you. And I firmly believe that each of us has this connection to that higher power, whatever you want to call it. You want to call it God, a higher power, spirit, the force, love. We all have that connection. Yeah. And when we sit in silence, I don't want to give away too much away, but there's a key.
Silence.
The title is a part of a key part of the book.
Yeah.
But silence is really important because you know, if you think of your mind as a bucket of muddy water, and you sit that bucket down, and the mud settles to the bottom, now what do you have? You have clear water. So when you sit in your chair and you don't have any disruptions, and you got all the monkeys chattering in your head, eventually the monkeys get tired, and they start quieting down. And then all of a sudden, now you can get the messages. You get God's Spirit talking to you. That's your intuition. Your intuition is God talking to you and guiding you. And that's where the ego, which also is a recurring theme in here, the ego, as they say in AA, and Wayne Dyer talks about it all the time, the ego is edging God out. The ego says, I don't need you. I got everything under control. I'm Michael Watt. I don't need your help.
Right.
So the ego creates all this noise and all these distractions because the ego is afraid that if you solidify that connection with your higher power, the ego is going to lose control, and the ego is not going to be necessary. And I think Ryan Holiday talks about it all the time. The ego is the enemy. And what really intrigued me about writing this is I've been blessed working for a number of very successful entrepreneurs, men and women, and I'm fascinated by them. My first job, I started working as a dishwasher when I was 14 for the most colorful character you'd ever want to manage in meeting. And obviously that just started me on the road to working with people who had this innate ability to make you want to please them. And with all the entrepreneurs that I worked with, all stripes of men and women, they all had that one common denominator, was you just innately wanted to please that person because it made you feel better. And three of them, I would consider the most successful entrepreneurs I either worked with, or my father-in-law was a very successful entrepreneur, never went to college. They just had this innate ability to lead people and to inspire people, and they were really, really smart. And the idea behind Lovers Own the Silence is to look for people like that and take from them what benefits you, what you like about that, and kind of make it work for yourself. Even if, because we all work for ourselves. You know, we're all entrepreneurs in a way. We're all Michael Watt Incorporated or Stephanie
you're absolutely
Incorporated.
right.
And when you look at your life and your career that way, what can I do to best help myself? Because I cannot be helpful to other people if I'm not rock solid myself. And that's kind of counter to the way I was raised. You know, it's like, well, if you're egotistical and you're bad and, you know, only a rich man has the chance of an eye of a camel, all that stupid stuff. You can only help others if you're solid yourself. And that's what entrepreneurs do. They succeed and then they can help other people. They make things grow. They provide opportunities for people. So that's one of the messages that I hope to get through with the book is look for the people that you can learn from and pick and choose what you like about them. And one of the other things that I found really intriguing, I've read The Alchemist, I've read The Peaceful Warrior.
Oh, great stuff,
Great stuff, but there was always kind of this wizard type stuff to it. And you read it, it's like, well, that's great, but what are the chances of me meeting a wizard?
Meeting a wizard,
right?
Exactly.
And that's what kind of got me. One of the motivating factors between writing the book was we do have these wizards around us.
Yes,
right?
guides.
The guides, the spiritual
Yes,
guides.
we have our
but
guides.
The people that you're working with, we all have plenty to learn from other people, particularly entrepreneurs. I think you can learn a lot from them. Not all of them. Some of them are scumbags.
Yeah, no, some of them are.
But for the most part, like I said, I've been blessed from working with some really great people. But to look for those real-life wizards, if you will, and learn from them and use them to inspire you to be better. And again, Wayne Dyer says, I don't want to be better than anybody than who I was yesterday, right? And that's the idea, is to don't look for the wizards. Look for the real-life wizards and learn from them and then try to be that person for other people.
Right.
And it's just like a kind of a cool way to go through life.
Yeah, no, and I am so glad you said about all of us living our lives as entrepreneurs, even if we're not.
Correct.
You know, because, like you said, Michael Watt Incorporated, it's something I've said to people, and you clarified it so well. We are all in charge of our own business.
Right.
The business of you.
Right. And it's the ego that makes you want to better yourself. And one of the characters in the book says, because the character is asked, do you need an ego to succeed in business? And the character says, you need an ego to get out of bed in the morning, right? Which is true, right? Because you want to be as successful, you want to be as productive as you can.
Right.
You should want to do that. And you don't necessarily have to own a business. You don't necessarily have to run something. You really just want to constantly improve yourself. You know, the whole Kaizen, 1%, 10% improvement every day. And that's how you improve your life. And it's no external factors. You know, whatever your challenges are, you kind of want to meet them head on.
Right.
And as the Buddhists say, and I love this, it said, don't ask, why is this happening to me? Ask, what can I learn from this? And when you embrace that, when you're constantly looking for how can I make my life better, it helps a lot. And the protagonist in the novel, she's kind of twisting the wind a little bit. She's a single mom. She's struggling to figure out how to care for her child. The child's father has disappeared, and his disappearance is one of the more mysterious elements in the book. And she struggles with that, and she's looking for an out where she knows she's going to be able to take care of her little son.
Right.
And she's looking one way, and the spirit guides in her life, the wizards, the real life wizards in her life, doing all they can to kind of steer her the other way.
Nice. Now, 18 years from first draft to now, I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing messaging, and there's also the storyline. Now, you said it was radically different from 18 years ago. Was the messaging the same and the story changed?
Oh, no, there was no messaging in the first
Oh,
version.
okay. It was story only.
It was story only, and you bring up a really important point. Because now, which cracks me up, I have friends of mine say, "Oh, I always wanted to write a book. How do you do it? What do you do?" And God bless her, a woman I know said, I can't get past the first paragraph. She goes, I have to have the perfect first paragraph. And I said, no, you don't. I said, you think of it as a pound of clay. You got to get that pound of clay out of your head, put it on the table, and then you go back and mound it into something. And not to name drop, but I love this story. 30 years ago, I was the director of a college on Long Island, and Nelson DeMille was the commencement speaker. And as the director of PR, it was my job to keep Nelson occupied while the commencement was going on. So it's just myself and Nelson in a room not too much bigger than the studio. And I'm standing there and going,
awesome.
I'm sorry, I have to take advantage of this opportunity.
Of course.
What's the secret to writing a book? Right? I hadn't even entertained the idea of writing a book at that point, but I just knew it was in me. And he looked at me, he laughed. He was a great guy, you know, and he said, what I do is I make a commitment to write 1,000 words a day. And some days it takes me 2 hours, some days it takes me 12 hours. He says, but I don't stop until I have 1,000 words put down. And then after a month, I have 30,000 words, and now I have a pound of clay.
Right.
And he said, once you have that, once you get over that hump, you have something to work with. And it's funny, as you write, then the story starts writing itself to a certain point. And that was incredibly helpful. I'm eternally grateful to him for that one.
I love that you said that the story starts writing itself, because I've heard that talking with other authors, that the characters just start living their lives.
They become part of your life too. And you're like, well, this is something so-and-so would say, or this, or without giving away, again, too much of the title, I was at the gym one morning, and now everybody wears the earbuds in the gym. I mean, I've had more spontaneous conversations than most people in the universe, but now with the earbuds, I start talking to myself and I realize nobody can hear me. It's very frustrating. So I'm shaving in the locker room in the gym, and there's another guy at one of the other sinks, and I say hi because he doesn't have earbuds, and he starts ranting. And he goes off, and now I'm looking at him. First of all, I'd never seen the guy before. I have never seen him since. And now I'm looking at him, he's ranting, and I'm like, is there security, you know, who let this guy in? But then a little voice in my head, which as I get older, I'm learning to listen to, said, there's a reason why this is happening. And during his rant, he used a phrase that struck home with me. And he kept saying, who owns the silence? I go, what the hell is he talking about? But as I thought about it, going into work that day, I said, that's something I can work with. And I kind of have to leave it there, because if I go beyond that, it kind of gives away what I think is a pivotal scene.
No spoilers.
But the point is, when you start writing a book, you're going to start seeing things as potential contributions to the story that you're telling. Or you're going to say to yourself, how would my character react to this situation? And that's really kind of fun, you know. Or you're going to pick up things on social. There's a few lines in that book that I borrowed directly from Twitter, where people would post things, and I was like, wow, that's genius. You know? And I have no recollection who, if I remembered to quote the person, I would. But I have some quotes in there. Some of them are great that I have no idea who posted it. So, but it's just Twitter. You're like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I could see my character saying that.
Yep.
So you write it down, always have a notebook, always write stuff down. And the other thing I would find really helpful is you start a list of who your characters are and their how you describe them. Because I had a couple of characters who started out with blonde hair and ended up with red hair. I was like, no, can't have that. You know,
can't
you got
have
to go
that.
back. You
A
got
little
to be
more
very
consistency.
consistent through the book. And
Right.
if one character's tall at the beginning of the book, he should be tall, or she should be tall by the end of the book.
Right.
That sort of
And
thing.
if one character is gruff or sarcastic, they have to keep up that.
Or something has to happen during the process of the book that he would react or she would react differently
Right.
by the end of the book. Everything has to have a logical, a linear timeline to it.
Right. Now, over these years that you have been molding your clay, I hear when you're speaking of the book so much of the messaging. And you said yourself, there was no message back 18 years ago. When did that start coming in?
Well, again, I was very fortunate to have some great feedback.
Great.
And one of the editors, a fellow named Robbie Wolliver, who, and this is when you know you're onto something, okay? About 2 or 3 summers ago, Robbie posted to Facebook, said, hey, I have a 2-week window, I got nothing to do. If you want, I'll take a look at your manuscript.
Wow.
And X amount of dollars. It was a bargain.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
the best money I ever spent.
Great.
Robbie was great, and he was the one who suggested that I kind of introduce a couple of extra layers. But the reason why the messaging is so important is you have to have in your mind what you want the reader to take away.
Right.
And then make sure that everything that happens along that line kind of ties in with that message and is consistent with what you want that message to be. And that's why certain characters are very helpful, and but they're helpful not in a squishy kind of way. You know, they kind of break Grace's chops a little bit because that seems more real. But their messaging has to be consistent, and that helps the reader kind of follow along and root for the main character.
Yeah.
So that's but the idea is, you know, what do you want the reader, when he or she closes that book, what's the main point or 2 points that you want them to walk away from?
Exactly.
Right.
And if before there was no point, it was just a.
And then you're wasting people's time. There
Story,
has
right.
to be some kind of takeaway, and the people have to feel that they're, I don't want to say a better person, but their horizons have been broadened
Right.
somewhat, having met these people. And they're people, I'm sorry, these are real life people.
Yeah.
Figments of my
Fiction.
imagination.
Right. But, you know,
in my mind,
you have to flesh
right.
them out as if they're real live people,
And,
for sure.
and if, honestly, as a writer, that's really kind of key to what you're doing, is the people have to be able to relate to them.
Absolutely. I have to read it and feel like I know these people. These are my friends.
And in some cases, you have to like them. In some cases, you have to hate them.
Yeah.
Right? But in this, it's kind of, we'll call it the Adam Richman, I think that's his name, the actor from Die Hard, the villain. There has to be an element of likability in the
Yes.
villain.
Yes.
There has to be something that makes you kind of, oh, it's a shame he's such a bad guy. you
Right.
know? Or at least
But he likes puppies.
he likes puppies, or there's a painful element that you can kind of relate to. You know, there's, and there is pain in the book. There are people
Yeah.
who go through some very painful things, which makes them somewhat relatable too. Even the, I don't want to say the bad person, because really there's no
Right.
antagonist here. There's just a lot of people who are going through a very calamitous time, and life hits them on the side of the head with a shovel from a couple of different angles, and you kind of feel bad for them, but the way they handle it is not right.
Right.
And that's, you know, one person handles it just right, and the other people are really on the wrong path. And you have to be able to see that difference between them. And you want to root for that protagonist.
Right.
And you want to hope that she goes down the right path.
You know, you mentioned earlier on how the world is different now than it was 18 years ago when you finished the first draft, and maybe more receptive. But you're a different person too. I mean, I would think that over the intervening years, the world has changed, you've changed, you have evolved this manuscript over time.
Well, there's another great Buddhist expression. No man can cross the same river twice. right? Once you've crossed the river, then it's a different river. The water keeps flowing, and you're different because you've already crossed the river. Once you've delved into a lot of these topics, and one of the things that is a recurring theme in the book is my friend Karen Garvey has a movement called Imaginism. And Imaginism is understanding that your external universe is a direct reflection of what's going on in your mind. And if you want to change what's around you, you have to change what's inside you. And the analogy that they use, and Neville Goddard talks about this, Mickey Singer, who's great, you know, the surrender, the life of surrender, leading a life of surrender. The analogy that they use is if you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see, you don't change the mirror. You have to change what inside of you.
Right,
you know,
right.
you have to think, at a minimum, you have to look at your thought process. And how do you talk to yourself, which is a really important lesson. It's probably the hardest lesson to learn, because I'm always saying, oh, you dopey bastard. Now, if I said to you, you're a dopey bastard, I would feel really bad, but I have no qualms about saying it to myself, and that's wrong, you know. So the first step is to, how do I think of myself? And do I love myself? And that's, again, it's a key part of, it's part of the key scene.
Right.
But until you can say, I love myself, and it's probably the first time I've ever said that out loud, until you can say that and mean it, really everything else is not going to work. And that's what's really key to this, is you have to love yourself before you can love others. And you have to be willing to give of yourself before you can expect others to give to you, and be willing to accept what others give to you, which is also a big challenge.
A big challenge for people.
A lot of
accepting
people.
That. Yeah.
And I'm, you know, God forbid you should compliment me, because I'll come right back with, well, you know, that's what, I got lucky, you know. Even this blind squirrel catches the occasional nut, you know. You have to be comfortable accepting a compliment.
Yeah, isn't it so hard?
And that's a great measure for how you love yourself. And it was Neville Goddard, or I think Joseph Murphy, who said, your self-confidence is a measure of your faith in God. I'm going to go back to having that connection to the higher power within.
Right.
If you have a solid connection, if you walk in faith, not by sight, and you know that you have this power and you have access to this power, and you can tap into this power anytime you want, you're going to have all the self-confidence in the world. Because when you have a problem that's bigger than you are, you sit down and you say, okay, baby Jesus, I can't handle this. I need some help. And I've done that a number of times in my life, and I'm going to do it more and more often because it works. But if you have that faith in God, then you're going to have all the self-confidence in the world. And if you're worrying, all right, if you're worrying, that means you don't have enough faith in God, because worrying makes no sense whatsoever. You know, somebody once said, worrying about a problem is like chewing bubblegum to solve an algebra problem. You know, it's just no correlation,
it's not helping.
Right? And I love that chart that says, worried, can you do anything about it? Yes, then do it. No, then don't worry about it, right? And that's one of the recurrent themes in the book as well. It's like, look, you know, fretting about this, worrying about it's not going to do you a lick of good. Right. So what can you do about it? If you can do it, then do it. And the first step is to tap into that power and say, I need your help. And that's where the ego goes down, and that's where your connection with God goes up, because you're saying, God, you're a big part of my life. I'm a child of God. You know, my Father and I are one. My Father is better. And when you can do that, you can really see remarkable things happen in your life.
Did you think, well, I mean, you are so insightful. 18 years ago when you started, or is this an evolution over these years?
It's an evolution, I would say, over the last 18 years.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of reading with the people I've mentioned.
Good.
It's incredibly powerful stuff.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And what's interesting about it, because I was talking to my wife about it, she said, well, do you realize if everybody believed that, the economy would crumble? Because the economy is predicated on people being insecure. Look at every television ad, right? Use this deodorant, use this hairstyle. You know, if you buy this product, you're going to be popular. And the interesting thing is, she's right. The economy would crash, but the one that would rebound very quickly, because everybody would have this killer self-confidence, would be remarkably wonderful. Because everybody would be as productive as they're capable of being. And that's a really exciting prospect. You
Yeah, I
think
can't
about
even picture what that would look like.
it would be a very different world.
It would. It would be
Right?
nothing
I mean,
like.
I hate to sound Pollyanna, but somebody once said, Pollyanna had a pretty good life. It's what's wrong with being Pollyanna? What's wrong with assuming everything is going to work out in your behalf?
Right.
If you let it, if you let go and let God. That's another AA, and that's another really important philosophy to embrace, is to let go and let God. And Wayne Dyer does a bit. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to borrow it. He breaks down a song, the Row, Row, Row Your Boat.
Okay.
I love this. He says, row, row, row your boat. You can't just sit there. You have to do something.
Right.
Right? You gotta
Row.
row. Gently down the stream. Right? He says, too many people want to fight and go upstream. They want to run against the curve and work as hard as they can. No, go gently down the stream.
Right.
Merrily, 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 merrily. He says, you have a choice. Right? It was Voltaire who said the most important decision you can make every day is the decision to be happy.
Yes.
He said, life is but a dream. Okay, we're all we're spiritual beings having a human experience. But if you looked at media, if you listen to politicians, we were all human beings getting tortured, right? Yeah. We're not. We're spiritual beings checking out this thing called Earth. Mickey Singer says Earth is God's Disneyland, right? You look around, you see the birds and the flowers and Floral Park. I mean, what a beautiful community, right? You just have all this great color and flowers and all these wonderful things going on. I was sitting outside for 10 minutes and 3 times somebody was honking at the guy in front of him because the light changed and it didn't move fast enough. You're like, come on, okay? Right. What's an extra 5 seconds? What are you going to do with that extra 5 seconds? Right. Now you pissed off the guy in front of you and you got them all agitated. Now they're both agitated. Exactly. What was the point? So when you step back and you let that spirit guide you, it's really kind of fun.
Well, I may never hear the words to row, row, row your boat.
That's
again
a
without
really
realizing
powerful message.
It's like a mantra.
There
we go.
Right?
That's going to be life changing.
It's when I heard that, I'm like, son of a bitch, when I think of
that is amazing. Right? Well, I am so delighted to get to meet Michael. You'll want to read Michael. Lovers Own the Silence. Michael Watt. Thanks so much for joining us.
We're just books upon a shelf. Try to understand this if you can.